please introduce yourself. Tom McNeil, the chair of the Human Resources Committee.
Ted Doolittle, member of the committee.
Steve Hernandez, member of the committee. Good to see everybody.
And Mr. Paul Philpott is not be able to participate today. And members of the SLT staff, can you introduce yourselves?
Sure, James Michelle, Access Health Connecticut.
Susan Rich-By, Director of Legal and Governmental Affairs, Access Health Connecticut.
Good morning, everyone. Glenn Jurgen, Director of Human Resources with Access Health Connecticut.
Okay, I think that does it. Apparently, there's no public comment this morning, so that's still true, Martin?
That's correct. That's correct, Mr. Chair. There's no public comment.
Okay. I think the minutes were circulated from May 12th, our regular meeting minutes. I'd entertain a motion that they be approved.
Well, I will certainly make that motion, Mr. Chairman. Ted Doolittle, Office of Healthcare Advocate.
Thank you. Do we have a second?
Second, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. All in favor of approving the
Mr.
minutes?
Chair. Mr. Chair, I'm sorry for interrupting. Is there discussion on them both, on those motions?
Okay. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor of the motion and the minutes as submitted indicate by saying.
Mr. Chair, I'm sorry for interrupting again. We're doing a roll call.
Okay.
Roll call vote.
That's good. Yeah.
Thomas McNeil?
Yes.
Steve Hernandez?
Yeah.
Paul Philpott? Tito Doolittle?
Yes.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Okay. Glenn, we need to hear from you on staffing, I guess.
Absolutely. Yeah. Good morning, everybody. Thanks for joining us today, both members of the committee and Access Health Connecticut staff. I want to jump into a staffing update, folks. I think this is pertinent information for the committee to know as, you know, our demographics continue to change, not rapidly or significantly, but just want to bring everybody up to speed since we've last met. Access Health continues to be an extremely diverse organization. As you can see here, we've got a very diverse background, and this is the categories of ethnicity that make up Access Health Connecticut. So really diverse, great organization, and this also helps significantly not only in the ability to relate and speak with our customers because of the different cultures and languages, but it brings robustness to our company culture as well. I can get into that more in the upcoming slides when I speak to our culture, but it really is a unique place to work, a great place to work, and our staff bring a lot of various experiences to the table, not only internally but externally when dealing with our customers, and a very strong suit for us to have. So Marcin, if you go to the next slide, please. Generation, folks, this continues to slightly evolve as I've been with the organization for just a little bit over 4 years. We're seeing the number of baby boomers in the organization decreasing. Our Generation X, which is the kind of the second largest, if you will, is holding fairly steady. But I want to draw everybody's attention to the millennials and the Generation Z. And our reporting system now reports the date ranges for what year of birth each generation respectively shows. But we're seeing a lot of millennials. These are folks who were born, as you can see from the chart, 1981 to 1994. And even our Generation Z. I did have one of those, I felt my age moments at the office a week or so ago when I was talking to an employee, And this employee mentioned she was born in like 2000 or 2001. And it gave me a little bit of pause, you know, but we are seeing some younger folks entering the workforce. And when I was having a discussion with Tom McNeil recently, he asked me to highlight some of the generational differences. So if we need to toggle back and forth to this slide here, but folks, I just want to draw your attention to the number of millennials and Gen Z. In the next slide, I'm going to talk about the generational differences with those groups in the workforce. So if Marcin, you could advance to the next slide, please. This is a very high level overview, folks, but our baby boomers, when it comes to how these generations show up in the work, baby boomers tend to be optimistic, competitive, the proverbial workaholic, very team oriented. The next generation, Generation X, they tend to be flexible, a bit more informal, somewhat skeptical, and versus the team, they tend to be a little more independent. When we get into our millennials, and you folks remember from the last slide, this is a growing group within our organization, they tend to be competitive, but they're also very civic oriented and open-minded and achievement oriented too. So they place a high value on achievements in the office, if you will, achievements in the workplace, achievements within their role, their titles. We look to Generation Z, the youngest members of our workforce, both in Access Health and pretty much out in the workforce in general. They tend to be very global. They're entrepreneurial. They're progressive. They're less focused. If we look at Generation Z, everyone, these are the folks who grew up not knowing what it's like to not have technology. So if you think to folks who were born, you know, in the latter part of the last millennium and the early part of this one, they never knew a time when you didn't have a computer in the house with a high-speed internet connection. They never knew a time where you didn't have a cell phone. They may have a brief memory of a flip phone, but you know their first memory of a phone was probably the iPhone or a similar touchscreen phone like that. So I'm not a master of the generations, but when you look at that less focused part, to have a life when you're constantly entrenched in the technology and short snippets and bursts of information that could possibly contribute to the less focused part. So the reason I bring this up, everyone, is it's always interesting to see the diversity of background. But as our organization moves forward, we have to look at the diversity of generations. You know what? If you look at, you know, you take the baby boomers versus Generation Z, these folks just have a much different view of the workplace. You know, for baby boomers and even a subset of Generation X, these are folks who, you know, when I first started working, it was suit and tie. You know, it was very formal. It was very structured. Where Gen Z, some of these folks started their career very early pandemic or during the pandemic. So for them to come to a workplace or get dressed up is somewhat of a foreign concept. So we're definitely keeping an eye on this. We're tailoring our messages accordingly. This is why we do our best places to work survey to get a pulse. This is why we meet with our employees. It's always fascinating and interesting to gauge the different needs of employees, but wanted the committee here to be aware of those generational differences. And we certainly are modifying, or I wouldn't say modifying, but just navigating this to ensure that everybody feels included on decisions. Everybody's voices is heard. When we make changes or initiatives, looking at how it impacts the employees and how different groups may perceive those impacts, not just departmentally, but generationally too. So it definitely adds another point of us to think about, to consider, but it makes it interesting, and you know, it's always neat to hear the perspectives of some of the younger workers too. I will say it does sometimes make me feel a little bit older when you have those discussions. But you know, hey, at some point they're going to be running the show, and their ideals, their values will be guiding us, not only as an organization, but, as a general workforce across the state and the country. So I wanted to share that with you folks. I know I've done some speaking, but if there are any questions or comments now, please feel free to let me know.
Hey, Glenn, let me just one quick addition to what you just said.
Sure.
As you know, as many of you know, we are working on a 5 to 10 year strategy for Access Health, and we're going to be presenting that to Steve Hernandez. He's committee later on this afternoon. The first 10 years, we were in reaction mode. We were reacting to what's going on in DC, in the marketplace. But as we look to the next 10 years, we want to shape what the future looks for Access Health for our customers. This generational millennial and from baby boomers, Gen Z, is going to be very helpful to us because our customers cross all 4 levels of generations. So as we develop our 10-year strategy, getting our employees' input is also good. It's going to be a big part of the strategy as we evolve it. And also, we do have, I believe, we have baby boomers, Generation X, and maybe even millennials as members of the SLT.
We do, yes.
So we have a good representation of inputs as we develop the strategy for the next 10 years. So I just want to put that in there, that the diversity of thought is as equally important to us as diversity of ethnicity. Thank you.
Question for you, Glenn. The first slide you had up was dealt with diversity of ethnicity, and you mentioned the diversity of language that you have to respond to customers. I'm just curious, and maybe you can't answer that off the top of your head, but I'd be curious of how many languages we have to accommodate in terms of serving customers. What's the breadth of the language that people need us to be responsive to?
Sure. I don't know that off the top of my head, Tom, but certainly we have that information, and I can report out to you and the committee with that, certainly. And I know our call center has quite a good number, and I'd be curious to see what internal languages spoken are too, but I will get that information for you.
Yeah, I'm just curious.
Some of the top, just so you know, obviously Spanish, but not just within the Spanish. There are different cultures within the Spanish community. A Puerto Rican person is different from somebody from Central America. So we have that diversity within Access Health. And we also, Polish is another big one. And Asian is becoming more and more prominent. When I say Asian, people from India in that part of the world. But I think right now, most prominent is probably Spanish and Portuguese also, as well as Polish. And Haitian Creole is becoming more and more prominent as well as we move to the shores around New London and Norwich area, Bridgeport.
Interesting.
And Tom, our call center, in addition to having bilingual call center representatives, we also have access. We have a language line, so they can connect, consumers with over 100 languages, with interpreters in over 100 languages, if they don't have someone directly in the call center. Yes.
Wow, that's great.
Yep. And we have on our website, there is a little tab at the top that talks about language help. And it connects you to a page that has the sentence about language help, about contacting the call center in a bunch of, I forget how many, but a bunch of different languages. So a consumer who maybe doesn't even read English or Spanish, if they went on our website and clicked on that, they could see in their language, oh, okay, this is what I do to get someone who speaks my language. And that's, part of an ACA requirement for speakers with low English language proficiency to make the exchange more accessible.
I got you. Great. Yeah.
Thank you, Susan.
If I may, Mr. Chair, just one question, or I guess an observation, but as the generational styles, as generations as we evolve through generations, and we get different generational styles kind of emerging through that evolution, I would imagine that there may be different human resource strategies, training, work style, understanding, and accommodation, or is it accommodation? You know, because I think, as you know, if we're a baby boomer, for instance, we may think, our impression may be that millennials don't have the work ethic that we do. What you're describing here, however, is just a different relationship and interpretation to our role as productive human beings. So how are we accounting for that in our training and onboarding?
Sure. That's a really good question, Stephen, and it's actually come up somewhat organically. We had a recent new hire. I believe she was a Gen X or a millennial or right on that cusp. But she had a good question, and we started incorporating it into our onboarding. She had asked, how do people here prefer to communicate? Are you an organization that does a lot of back and forth with email? Are you an organization that will do some back and forths, but after the second or third email, you either pick up the phone or walk over and talk to the person? Do you folks use a chat feature in Teams or something of that nature? So that's something we've definitely incorporated, Stephen. And it's also being mindful too. We had a very interesting interaction within the last year with an intern. Our senior generalist was on the phone with the intern. It was an innocuous call. I can't remember what it was about. I think it may have been his offboarding, and he was very brief on the phone call. You know, just brief with his answers. They hung up the phone, and this young man had a few more questions, and he was sending what was almost paragraphs and texts. And our senior generalist was kind of scratching her head, saying, "Oh my goodness, why didn't he just, pick the phone up and call, or why didn't he have these questions on the phone?" So a lot of it is adapting to the communication style, and to extrapolate from some of this data here. If we look at a generation that was brought up a lot in technology, these folks aren't used to using the phone, and I've seen some. You take what you see on the internet with a grain of salt. Some folks who have a phone, they don't talk on it. It just goes to voicemail, and then they text the person back and say, "Hey, what's up?" So, we really do our best to incorporate all the different styles. Our culture overall in the organization is very collaborative, very communicative. So we still embody that moving around the office, talking, face-to-face communication. But we do also get our information out through our weekly ATTMs. We follow up with emails. There's times where we're in the hybrid environment, someone's at home and they'll just start chatting back and forth. So it's a lot of pivoting, and a lot of awareness too. We're going to be having some training coming up for supervisors and managers, and part of that is going to be the generationals, to show, hey folks, some folks may want this. Some people like to sit down, have a good face-to-face conversation. Other folks may want a couple pings here and there over chat and a follow-up email. So it's definitely been incorporated, Stephen. So thank you for bringing that up. Okay, great. Marcin, if we can move ahead to the next slide, please. We'll get into more of the staffing information. And folks, this has remained fairly consistent with actually a slight shift. We're a more female-dominated organization in terms of gender, and we have always trended higher on the female side. But now with some recent hires and some transitions in and out of the organization, this has gone up slightly. It was more closer to maybe 50-55%. So we have seen a shift in more females in the workplace. Our pay type has remained fairly consistent. We still are more of a salary-dominated organization. And I know I've mentioned this before to the committee. We do have a smaller number of hourly, and most of those folks are in support roles, and that predominantly are internal customer support. And Marcin, if you could advance ahead for us. Okay, great. Any other questions before I move ahead, folks? Okay. I wanted to take some time to talk about our internal staffing advancements. A quick refresher, everyone. Access Health is under 100 employees. So we don't have a lot of opportunities for people to move up in the organization or a very clear career path. And I always use the bigger insurance companies in Hartford just because they're our proverbial neighbors. You know, if you were to start at one of the carriers, you could start in at a a claims analyst, and you would see a pretty straightforward career path of how you move up from a claims analyst to a higher level individual contributor, and then to management, to director, to VP. While we do have that here, the size of our organization limits us somewhat to the amount of movement that happens over a given period of time. So if someone had been here for full 10 years, for sure, there'd be advancement opportunities, but just not as much as in a larger organization. So our size can be both a plus because we're very familial, we're very adaptive, we're very flexible. It can also be a bit of a negative just because we do have a long tenure and we don't have a lot of movement internally. So as you can see from this list, folks, this is year over year internal movements that have happened since last January to this January. And for an organization under 100, I feel this is impressive. We've had all these internal movements, internal promotions. We had a few folks, if you recall, over the latter part of the summer and early fall, we had an associate director and a director leave. And James, I'm going to pull one of your quotes here because I really think it fits this narrative appropriately. It really caused a lot of dominoes to fall forward. We're actually still filling those positions. Just this week alone, we had 2 additional internal promotions, and those have created some gaps. I kind of like to use the analogy, folks, here, where, and I mean this in a respectful and kind of a humorous way. You know, it's kind of like HR is plugging holes in a dam, if you will. And, you know, we fill one role, we plug a hole, but then another hole pops out. You know, you're moving your hand here and you move your foot there. So it's a good, I don't want to say problem to have. It's a good advancement strategy that we've been able to incorporate here. We've given a really, really big number of employees the opportunity to advance. And for an organization our size, that's, I feel, very commendable. It helps our staff grow. It helps us with retention. As you're all aware, you know, the Affordable Care Act, the number of state agencies we deal with, for a small organization, there's a lot of ramp up time. I can remember when I first started, just getting my head around the acronyms, you know, was daunting, but all the swirling of different state agencies we deal with, regulations, federal, state. When we have that knowledge internally, and we can retain that institutional knowledge, it's a huge plus for the company. It stems the brain drain, if you will. We're able to keep that talent in house. We're able to grow them, and let's face it, it does benefit the employee as well. They're moving along in their career, and if they do get to a point where they can advance, they've got some really good skills in their toolbox that they can bring elsewhere. So I feel we take a strong stance on internal movement, on internal promotion, not only for our benefit, but the benefit of the employee. My personal philosophy is you certainly want people to stay. You like that institutional knowledge, but if you can get a number of extra years out of a high performer, you know, you've done well. You know, you've allowed them to grow, you've allowed them to develop, and you've allowed them to take the next step in their career, and then they're going to do great things somewhere else, which, while it may not benefit Access Health, it did when they were here, and we're proud of that. But folks, this is a list of the promotions and internal changes we've had over the last year, and it continues to expand. And I know it will expand further, just mentioning this week with those 2 promos, because there's going to be 2 more behind it that will happen. So we continue to move forward. But if anyone has any questions or comments on that, I welcome them at this time.
Just a question, Glenn, on employee educational opportunities.
Sure.
Are there education benefits and opportunities for training, say, outside the house, if you
Yes,
will?
absolutely. Yep. We have a tuition reimbursement program, and we have a number of employees right now who are taking advantage of that. We have, just off the top of my head, 2 or 3 employees who are getting their advanced degree, their master's degree. So they're participating in that. We participate with the state of Connecticut in-service training network. So because we're quasi-public, we are allowed to participate in that, which is a very reasonable cost for one-day sessions, either in person or remote, that folks can take. And that really runs the gamut. A lot of it is work and business focused. It's also focused on technology, Microsoft products, things of that nature, from kind of a first-time user all the way up to advanced. And we're also, Tom, looking into and going to roll out. You all may be familiar with a program online called Coursera, where it's virtual college classes, essentially. Very robust. We've got some of our employees now who are taking a few of those. We're going to be purchasing some more licenses. And the feedback's been very positive. Not only do you hear the lectures, there's assignments too, there's syllabuses. So it is, in essence, like attending a college course. You have some homework to do, there's some quizzes, there's some presentations. So we do have those opportunities, Tom, and we do have in-house as well. I will say some of the in-house is kind of like external. We will bring it in-house just logistically. It's easier to bring a presenter into Access Health and have a number of employees go out at separate times. We are also going to be hosting an on-site life and health insurance class, similar to what our Broker Academy students went through, for our employees to be licensed and have their life and health license. Now, as part of our regulations as a health exchange, they're not allowed to sell any products while they're working for Access Health. But the institutional knowledge that will give us and the credibility to say, hey, we have, we've got over 20 people signed up. So ostensibly, if they get their licenses, to say out in the field, hey, folks, we have this many people who have their licenses. We understand the customers. We understand the market. We understand the carriers. Will help significantly.
Looks like Ted has a question.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Great presentation, Glenn. I just had a question.
Thank you.
In terms of do we or any of our major vendors have any union presence?
As far as just help me understand that, Ted, as far as the vendors we work with.
Do we have any employees that belong to a union?
We do not. No, we're a non-union organization.
Okay, and do you know if that's true of the main vendors, like the call center as well?
I believe so. Yes, I believe they are non-union. Okay, great. Thanks, everyone. Marcin, if we could advance to the next slide here, and one more ahead, please, that would be great. Awesome. So, folks, for the 4th year in a row, we've been named one of the best companies to work for in Connecticut. I want to give a little bit of background on this just to refresh everybody's memory. This is a very organic process. About 20 to 30% of the survey is what we do as an organization, our policies, our benefits, those kind of tangible and intangible items that the company offers. The other 70 to 80% of the survey is the employee's opinion. So this is very employee driven. The survey is 100% anonymous. We can't incentivize people to say, hey, folks, if we get this award, then, a free lunch for everybody. It's not tied to anyone. We encourage people to respond, and we can see in real time what the response rate is, but that's all we can do. We can send reminder emails. We can announce it at our weekly all teams meetings, which we do. But this year we had a good response rate, 72%. So obviously the higher you get, the more valid the data is. With 72%, that's some solid valid data we have. And I just wanted to highlight some of the areas that our employees were favorable towards the organization. They're very favorable about our communication and culture. Employees had a good relationship with their manager. Diversity and inclusion. I think this goes back to one of the first few slides we looked at, folks, in terms of what our organization makeup is, and also how we value everyone, no matter what their background is within the organization, and we celebrate them for who they are. Our employee benefits, we're extremely fortunate as a quasi to be able to link up with the state of Connecticut benefits. They're just incredible. And our employees understand that too, because they know our products on the exchange. They understand what's out there. As you're all aware, we live in a world where the high deductible healthcare plan is very common. So for us to be on a state plan where you have very low premium contributions and very low copays is few and far between. I'm not aware of any other organization, or should I say, any other plan outside of the state that had it. There may be some municipal organizations in the state or towns that have that, but from my last kind of quick data overview, most of those have switched over to high deductible as well. So our employees are very appreciative of that. We do offer some robust ancillary products, short-term, long-term disability that doesn't cost the employee anything, dental and vision, no cost to the employee, with small contributions for dependents. Our work-life balance was high too. I'm proud of this. We pivoted quite significantly during COVID and after COVID. So folks do have that opportunity to have that balance, to have that time with family. And I feel the hybrid environment has allowed that to foster, which has been positive. And this is, as I mentioned at the top of this, folks, this is the 4th year in a row we've had it. So we're really proud of it. We want to continue this trend. And to kind of bring this presentation back, looking at our staffing updates, our demographics, our ethnicity, our generation, we work hard to look at those and make sure that everybody's included from their opinion, because there's diversity within the diversity, not only ethnically, but the backgrounds. But I'm real happy about this. It's a sense of pride. I know I've said this before, folks, but we're up against some pretty heavy hitters in the private sector. These are folks who don't have the state audits, the regulations we're subject to, kind of the public viewing, if you will. These are smaller governed companies that may be family run. They may not have board oversight. It may just be a president and a few people making decisions. And the honest truth is, folks, some of these organizations have, on-site gyms with a personal trainer who's in a few days a week. I'm not trying to be humorous. Some of them have, food carts that they bring around the office. Some of them have, beer and wine on Friday afternoon. So the fact that we can stand shoulder to shoulder with those groups with the constraints that we have speaks a lot to who we are and celebrating our culture. So a big congratulations to our staff. It's everyone contributing to this. It's not just HR. It's not just SLT. It's everyone. So thank you everyone for that. And I open it up for any questions or comments.
If I may, Mr. Chairman, just one quick comment. I would just, without harping on it, it is great that the employee benefits are so attractive. They are attractive because of the state employee unions. Mm-hmm. And I just put that out there. Your staff should be aware that this big positive development was brought to them by unions, even though they're not in themselves in unions. So that's a fortunate circumstance for them, but something to think about. That's just a comment. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Ted. Appreciate it.
So Ted, our employees really gratefully appreciate the health benefits that they enjoy, and they know the value of it. They really appreciate it. And obviously, unfortunately, we're not on the state pension plan as well. we're not on it, but we do have 2 matching plans. You have 457 that the state offers that we matches. We also have a where we contribute 5% of every employee's salary into 501A. I mean, no, 401A. And the 457 we match up to 5%.
Unions are a big headache for managers. I can speak as a person who's managed employees for a long time. But in terms of the benefits and the work-life balance, I mean, the unions, for instance, got their new 5-year contract just last year during the pandemic, and appropriate jobs, which most state jobs are, you're essentially, as of right, allowed to apply for up to 80% work at home. That is the good part of unions. The bad part is the complaints and everything like that managers have to deal with. But they do bring significant benefits and work-life balance considerations. And I think it's good that Access Health is able to, in a sense, kind of draft behind the employees on some of this, state employees on some of these benefits. Again, just a comment, food for thought.
Sure. Thank you, Ted.
Just a question, Glenn. Do you sense any generational conflict that you are aware of just because of the diversity of generations? And perhaps you might not see as much of that if people are working off-site versus being in the building all together at one time. But I'm just curious, do you sense any generational conflict?
Not necessarily generationally, Tom. I think what we see when it comes to, any conflict or disagreement has been in style or approach. And maybe generationally it may be part of the reason, but sometimes you have someone who likes that face-to-face communication and they're constantly getting pinged in an email when a quick phone call or a meeting could stem it. But we haven't seen much conflict. It's been more of a style, if you will, an approach that way.
Okay.
So Tom, I think one of the, regardless of generation, everyone, they want at least 2 things. They want accountability and timely communication. Right? They want to be in the know, whether they receive it in person, via email or text or telephone. That's one thing we do very well at Access Health, that we communicate very effectively with all of our employees about what's going on within the organization, what's going on with the board, what's going on within the industry. And that's an ongoing communication strategy for us. And we do it in person, doing our weekly ATTMs. We do it via emails, and we posted it on our internal website, if you will. So I think that's the one thing that we do well to manage potential conflicts within the organization, is by communicating very well and also holding each other accountable to deliver on what's expected of us. And that's clearly communicated to everyone as well. And also, again, when somebody's not doing what they're supposed to do, they are held accountable in a very respectful, professional manner, and that goes well across the entire organization. I think the challenge you have is when people are not doing their job and they're not being held accountable. For me, it's a question of fairness. Others are doing their job, they're doing it well, and somebody's not doing it. If there's no accountability, then it's unfair to everybody else who is stepping up. So I think that's the area we do. That's one of the areas we focus on from a management perspective, to make sure there's accountability. Communication is very quick and efficient and effective and timely. And also, we are being fair to everyone across the organization.
Okay. Thank you.
Excellent. Well, folks, this concludes my presentation. I want to thank the committee for joining. It's always good to see everybody. I appreciate your feedback. I appreciate your input, and I value your time. So thanks for taking the time today to listen, and just always enjoy sharing what's going on from the HR and employee perspective of things. So this committee's always good to see. So thank you, Tom, Steve, and Ted. Much appreciated today.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions for the good of the order? I guess,
Motion to adjourn.
okay. You have a second?
Second,
Oh, okay, thank you. You
Uh,
want to
roll-
call the
Roll
Mhm.
call, Thomas McNeil,
Yes.
Steven Hernandez.
Yes.
Paul Philpott, Theodore Dolittle.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Okay, thank you.
all.
Take care.
Thank you very much,
Thank you,
everyone.
everybody. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye now.
Thank you, Martin.